Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
This Day in Sports History. Hey, and welcome to This Day in Sports History. It's May 17th, and on this day in 1987, it was a thing that really wasn't a thing, but that thing was still pretty impressive. Does that make sense? All right, let me explain. So this is called the pass in the grass. But it wasn't really a pass, more of a save, and an incredible maneuver that has taken on mythical proportions. Dale Earnhardt, the Intimidator, he didn't mind using the bumper to move a car out of the way and gain an advantage. But if you tried to do the same thing to him, well, he didn't take that very well. So on this day, it's the Winston All-Star Race at Charlotte Motor Speedway. It's taken on different formats and names over the years, but on this particular day, it was 20 cars instead of the normal 43 that you see in a NASCAR race. The drivers who participated had won in the previous calendar year, or they had received a special exemption. It was a 135-lap race, split into 3 segments, and at the end, there's a really big check. In this case, $200,000 for the winner. Typically, race car drivers don't like to beat up or wreck cars, but the mantra for the All-Star event has become either bring back the money or bring back the steering wheel, aka a wrecked car. In essence, drive it like you stole it and don't worry about consequences. And there really was not anybody better at driving with that wild abandon right on the razor's edge of control than Dale Earnhardt. But here's the thing, he didn't have the best race car on the track that day. Bill Elliott did. Elliott would end up leading 121 of the 135 laps, but he just didn't lead the one that he needed to. The final segment was 10 laps. On the first of those closing 10, down the backstretch, the field was still bunched with 2 rows of cars. Jeff Bodine led going into turn 3 with Earnhardt on his tail. Elliott was running the low line. Bodine came down the racetrack and he made contact with Elliott. Bodine spun, Bill checked up a little, and he went up the racetrack. Earnhardt hit the gas and beat everybody back to the start-finish line, and he now led the race. On the restart after the caution, Elliott tried to get a run on Dale's yellow and blue Wrangler No. 3 car, but Earnhardt blocked him. With 8 laps to go and coming out of turn 4, Elliott went low, Earnhardt went to block, but Bill already had the run. Elliott's front right got into Dale's left rear, and Dale was in the infield grass. So pause to think for a moment. Asphalt track, solid, dry, a place for slick race car tires, right? Grass, soft, probably has some dampness, and it's slick. Not a place for slick race tires on a car doing close to 200 miles an hour. The large majority of race car drivers would have spun, done a 360 or several of them, or hit a wall or something. An overcorrection, and you shoot up the racetrack into the outside wall. But not Earnhardt, and not today. He didn't even let off the accelerator. Instead, he redirects the car back onto the track. The back end wobbles just a bit, still no let up, and he settles right back in front of Bill Elliott, still in the lead. So, grass, you got it. Pass? No. More of a maintain, but that doesn't really rhyme with grass, now does it? But still, incredible how he kept it together. And with a lap and a half to go, Elliott came back at him. Coming off turn 2, Earnhardt went low and let Elliott come up beside him on the outside. And then going into turn 3, moved Elliott up the track, and a little rub on Bill's front left caused him to cut a tire. Earnhardt then raced Terry Labonte and Tim Richmond back to the line, and he stayed out front again, taking the checkered flag and the $200,000 check for the win. After the race ended, Elliott, who ended up finishing 14th, and finishing 14th when you led the most laps and had the best race car can be a bit frustrating, Bill was not happy, and he showed his displeasure on the cool-down lap by hitting Earnhardt with a little door ding on the backstretch. Right after the race, both drivers reacted about like you figured they would.
Well, that was something else. You know, Bill spun that 5 car out and caused a big mess, and then he come up there and tried to spin me out twice. I didn't take it.
Yeah, but the thing of it is, I was clearly under him, and I was going on. I clearly had the quickest car. You know, he was trying to cut me off every way he could.
Awesome Bill from Dawsonville would have the best car the following week, too, when the NASCAR boys raced the Coca-Cola 600, taking the pole and leading the most laps once again. But once again, he would come up short. Kyle Petty won that day. Earnhardt would win another 2 times before Elliott got back to victory lane. From auto racing to a foot race we go. So 11 days ago, I did the story about Roger Bannister's sub-4 mile. It had taken all of human history until 1954 to do it. And then, in a span of 13 years, the record time had been lowered 8 times by 6 men. Well, on this date in 1975, it was Tanzania's Philbert Bayi who lowered the mark once again. Now, prior to this day, American Jim Ryan's record of 3 minutes 51.1 seconds stood for nearly 8 years. On this day at the International Freedom Games in Jamaica, the sun blazed in the sky, raising the temperatures from bake to broil. Bayi's strategy for the race was the same as it always was: run fast and run up front. No pacing, no drafting, no lying in wait to pounce on the final lap or turn. The 21-year-old Bayi led wire to wire, but he was pushed to his limit by American Marty Licouri, barely holding him off with a final kick to stop the clock at 3:51 flat, 1/10 of a second faster than Ryan's mark. 6 guys in this race ran the mile in less than 4 minutes. Now let that sink in just a bit. 21 years on from Bannister doing it for the first time, and now 6 men in the same race best that mark. And just like Bannister's mark didn't last long, neither did Bayi's. Less than 3 months later, the mile record would be lowered again by 1.6 seconds by a New Zealander. In 1979, it was a Major League Baseball slugfest that fell short of the all-time record, but it's still fun to talk about. And most of the time, if you're talking a bunch of runs in a baseball game, you're probably talking about a game at Chicago's Wrigley Field. And so it was that the Philadelphia Phillies and the Cubs put up a scoreboard-bursting amount of numbers. The wind was blowing out to left on this day, and it must have been more like a gale force instead of a light breeze. Definitely a pitcher's nightmare. The Phillies and Cubs combined for a total of 50 hits and 11 home runs. Dave Kingman hit 3 of them for the Cubs. Mike Schmidt and Bob Boone each had a pair for the Phillies. Philly built up a 17-6 lead after a 7-run first inning and an 8-run third. But the Cubbies fought back, and after a 3-run 8th, the game was tied at 22 heading into extra innings. When Mike Schmidt hit a solo shot in the 10th, and then the Phillies finally put the Cubs' bats to sleep in the bottom half, it was a 23-22 win for Philadelphia. So, 45 runs combined surely was a record, right? Well, nope. 57 years before this one, the Phillies and Cubs combined for 49 in another windy day at Wrigley. That game from 1922 is still the highest scoring game in Major League history. This game from 1979 is number 2. And time now for today's non-sports fun fact. Belgian casinos have birds in cages. If you would like, you can bet on which bird will sing the loudest and the longest. But I'm going to assume there's other things that you can probably bet on that bird doing. That's all for today. I'll have more tomorrow on This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website, seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.